Babies aren't assholes, and neither are you. Hi, I'm Tanya, and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Threshold. And full disclosure, I was going to try and do this episode in one take, and I just finished doing a take, but I had a necklace on, and it made the audio really bad. And the reason that I was trying to do this in one take is because I had an epiphany about authenticity, and I wanted to make this episode as authentic as possible. And so I think that yesterday I had this idea. I think I embodied for the first time how important authenticity is. So I was thinking about it all day yesterday. And then this morning I wrote this big, long manifesto about authenticity. And so tune out now or buckle up, because we're going to go with a manifesto and end with a confession, and that's what we're doing. So you have been forewarned. And so I think it's also fitting that I came up with a manifesto, because a manifesto is one of the things that kind of tipped me into this, leaving a place that I was really feeling inauthentic. And I didn't even realize that that was the issue until recently. So I really admire authenticity in other people and in things. And sometimes I'm even jealous of people that I find really authentic and who are unapologetically authentic. So I respect them and sometimes simultaneously jealous, because I want that for myself, because that's what jealousy really is. It's alerting you to something that you would like for yourself. I also think that the world is a little bit out of balance these days. And I think that can be traced back to the fact that authenticity is at extremely low levels. Institutions, corporations, governments, social media, mainstream media, I am not finding them super authentic. I think a lot of what they do involves chasing money or CYA, covering your ass. And I don't think it's conducive to joy and authenticity. I have, in my old life, students were afraid, to discuss certain things because people aren't being authentic. And authenticity isn't always celebrated or respected or even accepted. In this sort of place in my life, I have teacher candidates who are afraid to delve into certain topics because of perceived, backlash or things that might happen. And that's not doing any of us any good. And I think that toxic positivity and wellness is an industry, not as an idea, have kind of come out of this need for authenticity, because toxic positivity and wellness the wellness industry, I should qualify, are distracting us from the fact that if we were being authentic, we wouldn't have to pretend or, to be positive. And we wouldn't need a wellness industry because we'd already feel well, because we were being authentic and the people around us were being authentic. And I think that all of this, at least for myself, where I'm feeling that I've been less authentic, and institutions and governments and what have you around me have been less authentic, feels like it's putting all of us into individual, smaller and smaller boxes of inauthenticity, powered by algorithms and smartphones, which I'm old enough to remember when my mom called the television the idiot box, and I think that the smartphone is the new idiot box. So we're in these smaller boxes, connected only by the idiot box, which is not necessarily spreading authentic anything, to be honest. And as a result of these boxes, loneliness is at an all-time high. think the Surgeon General in the United States was talking about how dangerous that is recently. And this loneliness, because we're isolating ourselves, is causing us to be even less authentic, because we don't even know sort of what's going on around us. We don't necessarily know that, or we can't see for ourselves that what we're getting on our, on social media, or we're being told by whomever, governments and that kind of thing, is not authentic, because we're not connecting with other people who, we might be able to discuss ideas with. And speaking of social media, influencers are a thing. Like, just think about that term, influencers. So they're trying to get you to do something. But why are they so prolific? They seem to be everywhere. It's because we seem to be easily influenced. And that's something that perhaps we should work on. If we were being authentic, we wouldn't be so easily influenced, because we would know ourselves and we would stand in that. And as you can see, this is one take, my manifesto. So I would also go on to say that tradition and progress, neither of those things makes something authentic or inauthentic. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it true. It doesn't make it authentic. So you don't have to feel like just because something's always been done this way, it must be authentic. Or just because all the cool kids are doing it, or Gen Z is doing it, that is authentic, right? You can decide for yourself. And some things that are traditional will be authentic, and some things that the cool kids are doing will be authentic. I would draw attention, of course, to history, because I was a history teacher in my former life. Fascism, communism, tribalism, all of those things have survived, thrived, are making a comeback, because they depend completely on people pretending. So I would say pretending is the opposite of being authentic. People pretended that they were supporting these governments, and probably the vast majority of them weren't. And that's where, we can link that back to power. People only have power over you if you give them that power, right? We consent to be governed, but they're a minority. They don't authentically have power over us, because we are the majority. I would say, here's where I'm going to tell you, right? And, in full disclosure of authenticity, that, and anybody who knows me knows that I usually skew to the left. I don't agree with everything that the left says, and I don't disagree with everything that the right says. And I never have. And so I will confess to you that I have agreed with Donald Trump when he was talking about workers' rights. And I find myself in the present moment agreeing with the Premier of Ontario, who was talking about, putting Canada first. And I'm not sure that neither Trump nor Doug Ford were being authentic, but I'm being authentic in telling you right now that I have agreed with those two men that I wouldn't necessarily agree with on many other things in those instances. So I would invite you to like what you like. Do what and who you love. And don't like what everybody likes just because everybody likes it. And the example that springs to mind here is Hollywood. There are plenty of things that lots of people like that I don't understand. There are singers that I don't like, I don't understand, movies, that kind of thing. And Hollywood is kind of revealing itself to be less than authentic. I guess they've always been less, maybe not so authentic, but there's more revelations coming about Hollywood that kind of reveals the very unsavory side to it. And so, it, that idea of liking something just because other people like it reminds me of that old, the saying, one of my favorite sayings is that sometimes when you follow the masses, the M is silent. Majority opinion doesn't make it right, doesn't make it authentic, right? And I think that pretending is, or the inauthenticity is the problem that most of us have with this unbalanced world. And I think that we just have different solutions to this same problem. And so if we could authentically have discussions with one another, we might come to a really good solution to many of these problems. And we could avoid things like backlash and cancel culture that make people act even more inauthentically and make them even angrier. And of course, play into trust issues that we have with all of these things that I mentioned, like governments and mainstream media and social media and all that stuff. We have trust issues with them because we don't believe them to be to be authentic. I really would, and I really do actually, respect someone who disagrees with me when they're being authentic, when they believe it. If I don't think that they believe this story that they're telling me, I don't respect them. And that's true of, governments and corporations and what have you, institutions. And this brings me back to babies aren't assholes. We don't get mad at kids for telling the truth. And we don't get mad at babies for crying because they're being authentic. This is why we love children, or people who love children. We don't have to. But people who love children, I would argue, at least for me, is I love children because they're so authentic. I would ask you to think, let's do an exercise. Let's say that there's the zombie apocalypse. I don't know why I always go to zombie apocalypse. I don't want one to occur. But think about when, if society, you can watch, those movies like The Walking Dead or what have you, or that other one, The Last of Us, I think it is. In these movies, when like society collapses, the thing this society that I happen to live in is chasing a lot of money. That's the first thing to go. Because it's inauthentic. It loses its authenticity when it's not worth anything anymore. Same with gold. I mean, you could have the gold standard, which we used to have, but gold is just shiny rocks. The things that sustain you and the things that feel good to you are the things that are authentic. And again, I'm coming back to babies aren't assholes. Babies can change. Babies can evolve. Babies can grow, and so can you. In fact, we encourage babies to grow and change and evolve, and I think we should encourage that in each other as well. Babies and children live in the now because they aren't calculating what to say, how to say it, how to act, how to dress, the potential outcomes of saying this or doing that. And all of this leads to, I think, a lot of the anxiety or increased anxiety that we are seeing. As people are very concerned about what other people think. And I think authenticity can go a long way to assuage that. That anxiety is leading to people avoiding themselves and their authenticity and doing it in ways that aren't necessarily great coping mechanisms, such as, substances, shopping, phones, and all those things are damaging us and society in general. And again, kids aren't doing that. Very few children are having a beer and smoking a cigarette because they're not necessarily, worried about what they said at play school today. I would encourage you to do what's in your nature. Don't try and fight your nature, right? You can always improve, but you don't have to be what you're not. And I think this often happens to us, and it happened to me because I happen to believe that we as a society put a lot more value on typically masculine characteristics. But if I am honest with myself, I don't actually enjoy embodying a lot of typically masculine characteristics. And it feels inauthentic. So I think we're doing a lot of damage by placing values on things that are, in our nature. Plenty of masculine values or plenty of masculine characteristics are very important. Plenty of feminine characteristics are very important. And I think if we were just authentically able to live in those because they were equally valued, we'd be more authentic. And I think in addition to anxiety, anger is what happens when we're being inauthentic. Anger is not a bad emotion. It's actually quite a good defensive emotion for yourself. And I'm not saying that you should lash out with anger, and I'm not saying that you should direct it at yourself. You should acknowledge it and then try to figure out why you're angry. Anger is normally there to defend you. It's alerting you that somebody has crossed your boundaries. And your boundaries are most likely defending your authentic self. So if you find yourself angry, you may be in a situation where people are being inauthentic, or you're kind of being forced to be inauthentic. And I would argue that that is what happened to me when I took a break from my job. I felt like my ability to be authentic was being impeded on in increasing amounts. So here's my confession. I said I would end with a confession. So here's my confession. I have been inauthentic. I think in my big thinking of this, I'm presently hiding from inauthenticity. I'm hiding from it by taking time out from work. I don't leave the house very much. And I don't have social media, and I've stopped watching the news. And I think that that's all well and good, but I'd be better served, and society would be better served, if I was just authentic and went out there and spread my authenticity. I think back over my life, and I've had ideas or thoughts or feelings that I knew to be true, but I just went along with society, kind of like the Asch conformity experiment, where you actually have the right answer as the person who's being in the experiment, and everybody else is pretending that they all agree that the wrong answer is the right answer. So I've done that at work. I've done that with fashion. I mean, I've had blue eyeliner and huge, I lived through the 80s. I made fashion mistakes by going along with society. And it didn't feel great. I mean, in the 80s, the fashion maybe did, but looking back, it didn't feel great. And then I think back to things when I actually did stand firm in things that I believed in, that perhaps other people around me accepted as good, or at the very least accepted as, sort of normal or what have you. Like things like commuting every day to work, 50 weeks of the year, in ever increasing traffic. That seemed crazy to me. And so I won't say that I didn't commute to work, but I did arrange it so I had a reverse commute, and I did arrange it so that I never worked 50. Well, I had a very small window of time when I worked 50 weeks out of the year. So I would encourage you that following your feeling about authenticity is often leads to better decisions. I will go on to say I'm not fearless. I care far too much what other people think. I smoked cigarettes into my 40s and hid it all over the place. I don't have it all together. I actually hate fighting and arguing, unless it's really at a sort of intellectual level. I feel badly when I offend people, or I imagine I offend people, and I stew about it for days and weeks. And I'm a recovering people pleaser. And so all of those things, you may or may not know about me, or thought, yeah, we know that. That's pretty obvious, or I don't know you. But I'm just in the spirit of being authentic. Those are my confessions. So I would love for you to join me in my new quest to live as authentically as possible. And I think that the first thing that we need to do is try to remove these levels of programming that have, told us what's normal, what's right, what's wrong. I'll leave that to you to decide how to do that. But I mean, I could be taking a vacation from inauthenticity like I did. I highly recommend it. I would recommend that you feel in your body for the answer, right? So sometimes I didn't even notice that my shoulders were up to here, right? You can oftentimes, it's a headache, your jaw's clenched, your shoulders are up, you feel it, in your neck, your throat's constricted. You might feel like almost like a weight's on your chest, or, something's not right in your stomach. Those are, some possible clues that what's going on around you, or what you're participating in, is inauthentic, and you don't like it. You can think back to decisions that you've made that were made from an authentic place, where you didn't necessarily take into consideration other people's opinions, and how well that turned out for you, and try and see if you can repeat that process. And you can start small with your choices, but let's try and make as many choices as we possibly can in the most authentic way that we possibly can. And again, I'm certain that authentic choices will be kind choices. If you find yourself making a choice that you believe to be authentic and it's not kind, I would encourage you to dig deeper, because again, babies and children aren't assholes, right? And they are authentic. So please join me in being authentic for yourself, for your loved ones, for society, and for the planet. I think everybody would benefit from as much authenticity as possible. And I authentically hope to see you next week beyond the threshold.